Welcome back to App Stories. Today's episode is brought to you by Memberful. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Vitici. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing great. We have more to talk about because last week we talked all about productivity, just the apps that personally make you and I more efficient in kind of our day-to-day lives. And we had so much to say about note-taking apps and task managers. Shocking, right? And RSS, of course. That we had, we had more to go. So we've got a whole lineup of additional apps we want to talk about today. We actually expanded our lists a little bit, I see here. We're gonna dive right in, I guess.
I guess you have some follow-up first for me.
Yeah, I guess that's true. You convinced me to try Lear last week.
I told you that I can be persuasive.
You are persuasive, yes. And it is a great app. I still like Reader a lot. We, as this show goes out, the new version of Silvio Rizzi's Reader app will have been out for a few days. It's a very different take on RSS in that it's not just for RSS, it's for podcasts and YouTube videos and Reddit, a whole bunch of different stuff that can be all combined into one app, one feed, essentially, that works a lot like, I guess I would say it works closer to an app like Ivory, where you have all of that content that's loaded in automatically. You can look at it all intermingled. You don't have to do that, but you can look at it all intermingled, and it preserves your place, like where you left off, and you can just kind of continually scroll it as things come in. And I've played with it. I love the design. I think it's an interesting take on these kinds of feeds. But I think if you listen to the way we use RSS last week, you probably have guessed that it's probably not the way we want to use RSS. The way I want to use RSS is, as we talked about last week, which is just scanning a lot of headlines very quickly and throwing those articles somewhere else, which we'll get to in a little bit, which is why I thought, even though Reader 5, which is now called Reader Classic, is still around and is still going to be developed, I wanted to also just kind of reacquaint myself with what else is out there. And the thing that really, I think, and we'll get to Read Later apps soon, the thing that really, I guess, attracted me most to Lear right now is how easy it is to get Readwise Reader integration working. Because all you need to do is you can go to the Readwise website, get your access token, drop that into Lear, and then you can have Readwise as like a button in the toolbar or in the share sheet or in the context menu. There's a bunch of places that can be surfaced within Lear depending on which app you're using. And I find that really convenient because it allows me to shuffle it off to somewhere else where I know I'll be able to find it. Since Readwise Reader is a web service, it'll sync very quickly and easily to all the versions of that app that I've got on every platform. And I can just pick up where I left off at some point later in the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you tried Lear. I've taken a tour of various RSS clients lately. That's something I always do, with note-taking, task managers, and RSS readers. I still think Lear is the best. I'll give you another option. If I were not to use Lear anymore, I think, and something that I actually check out from time to time, I would probably use Unread. It's a very minimal and elegant RSS client, but especially on the iPhone, I really love how you can navigate Unread with one hand, and like the one-handed operations in Unread. I think they are some of the most comfortable interactions I've ever seen in an RSS reader on the iPhone.
Yeah, I think especially for the iPhone, that is a particularly good app, and I believe that it also has Readwise Reader integration.
Yes, and
too.
As of this week, it also comes with direct integration with Good Links. So it opens which I'm going to talk about shortly. It opens the Good Links extension directly, and I believe it also has another web-based integration, which is Omnivore. Omnivore is also now supported in Android.
Yeah. I will say the one thing about Lear that I miss from Reader so far, and I've only been using it for like 5 days or so, is I think the keyboard navigation on Reader is superior because it uses kind of the old Google Reader conventions, and those are ingrained in my memory. Like with Reader, I can just hit R on my keyboard and it refreshes, or I can hit A and it marks everything as red. There are keyboard shortcuts for both of those things in Lear, but they're multi-key combinations, and it's just way faster to use Reader. And there are some things that aren't even available on Lear that are available in Reader in terms of keyboard shortcuts. Plus, Reader has a bunch of definable keyboard shortcuts as well that you can customize as the user. So I really appreciate those. And the Lear, I think Lear's app on the Mac isn't quite up to snuff compared to the iPhone and the iPad app. It's pretty good, but that's where I really noticed the lack of the keyboard shortcuts, or the little bit more friction in the keyboard shortcut scheme compared to Reader is on the Mac, where it's not quite up to par with Reader. But that's not as important to everyone, so it's still an app worth checking it out, and I'm going to stick with it for a while.
No.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Memberful. If you're a developer building a membership website for a client's business, you should be using Memberful. It's the best-in-class membership software used by the biggest creators, publishers, and media companies across the web. Memberful includes everything you need to get the job done and get up and running quickly. It's got a seamless WordPress integration, content protection enabling your clients to offer exclusive blog posts, videos, and other downloadable resources. Plus, there are lots of membership options allowing you to do things like tiers and recurring subscriptions, even one-time payments, and a whole lot more. Its built-in payment processing uses Stripe, so checkout is super simple, and you have full customization and control over your implementation using your client's branding. We've used Memberful at Mac Stories since 2015 for Club Mac Stories, and we love it. We've stuck with it from the very first day of the club until today, and it's grown with us as the business and what we offer grows too, which is why we love it, because it really fits in with our existing tech stack and didn't require a lot of work to get up and running. And that's the thing, Memberful really scales gracefully, whether you're a solo creator just starting out or a big media company that's just starting up a membership business. You'll find that Memberful has a robust API and webhooks, along with integrations for popular services like MailChimp and Discord, along with WordPress. Plus, you'll get comprehensive analytics and the ability to automate email communications. Help your clients monetize their passion today by getting started for free at Memberful. Just go to memberful.com/appstories. That URL is memberful.com/appstories. Memberful.com/appstories. The best way for creators, publishers, and media companies to reach their audiences today.
Okay, so I want to talk about Read Later. I want to talk about Readwise Reader.
Yep.
And sort of my tumultuous relationship with it.
Mine too.
So I continuously bounce back and forth between Readwise Reader and Good Links. And the more I think about it, the more I think there's a strong reason for me to use Good Links, and there's another strong reason for me to use Readwise Reader. But there are, in theory, more reasons for me to dislike Readwise Reader than Good Links. So these are very complex feelings, and I'm going to try and make sense of all of them. I really love how in Readwise Reader, I can collect both my articles, so things that I save from the web, and my newsletters. With Readwise Reader, you get a special email address that you can sign up for a bunch of newsletters. Like I receive all of my Substack subscriptions, Platformer, Bloomberg newsletters, like all those things.
Yep.
They can go into my Readwise Reader, and I can have separate views for my articles and for my newsletters. But if I want to, I can prioritize all my newsletters, save them into my shortlist, and manage them just like I manage articles. The triaging of Readwise Reader is also unmatched, in my opinion. I really like the idea of separating between later and shortlist. So the shortlist meaning like it's your favorites, right? So like the things you are supposed to read earlier than everything that you can read later. The triaging is built into the share extension. so that when you save something to Readwise Reader from the share sheet, it's very easy. Like from a pure like interaction standpoint, it's very easy on the iPhone to say, okay, boom, shortlist, and also let me apply a tag. Like the interactions in the share sheet are very easy and fast. There's something I dislike that I have tried because, like, contrary to what some people think, I may dislike some of the current implementations of artificial intelligence in apps, but I try to keep up with it and I try to use them. So one of the things that Readwise Reader has is the Ghost Reader functionality. Ghost Reader being basically like a custom ChatGPT based agent that lives inside of Readwise Reader and allows for different kinds of functionalities like sum up this article for me or quiz me on some of the topics of this article, that sort of thing. Like it's a reading assistant based on ChatGPT that is inside Readwise Reader. Now, I fundamentally think that, like, something that I feel deeply is if I want to read something and it's an article from an author that I like, what's the point of summarizing an article? Like, I really dislike this idea of going from articles that have an introduction and a main body and a conclusion and a development of the story throughout to just boiling everything down to a summary made by AI. I think it defeats the purpose of reading, is how I feel about these features.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And there are whole services that are dedicated to doing nothing but that. And to me, that's like, like business books that are boiled down to like, I don't know, 1,000 words or something. And this is kind of along the lines of those. And I've never really understood the desire to save something. If you want to save something to read later enough to read it later, why would you be reading a summary of it is kind of where I come down.
I don't get it either. But because of, like I said, I try to keep up with these things. One of the things that Ghost Reader can now do in Readwise Reader is a custom ChatGPT prompt. So you can assemble your own commands in the Readwise Reader web interface. You need to go to the web to prepare these commands. And there's a simple syntax that you can follow. So as a test for this episode, I thought, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to create a custom Ghost Reader prompt that replicates my shortcut that I have for good links for those times when I'm reading an article, I highlight a bunch of text, and I want to turn those highlights into a linked post on Mac Stories.
Okay.
I want to see if I can replicate that with natural language and Ghost Reader based on ChatGPT. And what's the model that they're using now?
GPT-4o.
GPT-4o. Yeah, using that. I did build a prompt that does that. However, the Ghost Reader integration in Readwise Reader does not have access to the HTML of an highlight. So, for example, say that I highlight something that has a link in it or some italic text.
It just does the text?
It just does the text. All of that formatting is lost. And it honestly took more time for me to get the syntax right. Like explaining in plain English, you got to take all these highlights and you got to sort them from earliest in the document to the oldest one at the bottom. You need to use a markdown block quote syntax. Like it took more time for me to do that than to just add a simple logic in shortcuts to say, okay, repeat block, take all the highlights, make markdown. Like it took way more time for me to explain it. But maybe it's just a proficiency thing that I'm faster with shortcuts. But even then,
it's not even that difficult in shortcuts though. I mean, that's not like what I would consider an advanced shortcut.
And also like Ghost Reader in Readwise Reader, it cannot process that text. Like the resulting text is just presented in a pop-up. You cannot say copy this text to the clipboard or send this text to Obsidian. It just puts that text in a pop-up window, and then you got to select it and copy and paste it, whatever you want. So all this to say, this Ghost Reader integration, I think there's potential for people like me that don't like summarization, I don't need flashcards, I don't need to be quizzed, I just want to read an article and save a bunch of highlights. I think there is potential to turn it into something that integrates with the operating system more deeply, but it doesn't do that for now.
Right. Well, and there is one thing that it does that I've been meaning to try. I actually haven't had the time to do it, which is you can use Ghost Reader to auto tag your stories, which,
sure.
I mean, that might be useful if you're if
Sure.
you're using tagging as a way to search for things.
At the same time, I really think that Readwise Reader's triaging system and the integration of articles and newsletters is excellent.
Right.
I would use Good Links. Good Links has the opposite of Readwise Reader. No AI, incredibly native experience for Apple platforms. That means widgets, that means shortcuts. It means in the future iOS 18 icon support, control center support, like all the things you would expect from a modern experience on Apple platforms. But increasingly, I get my favorite content from sources that I pay for, and those sources, they send me either emails or I need to go to the web to save those articles, and Good Links does not have that sort of integration. So I am torn between something that is very native and speaks to my heart, which is Good Links, and something that has aspects that I sort of dislike or find not really that useful, but has an excellent integration with external web sources.
Right.
So,
right.
yeah.
Well, let me add to this a little bit, because I have my own quirks when it comes to Readwise Reader. And the reason I've been using it, the reason I returned to it, is because it is so good on the desktop. Again, it's very much the same kind of thing that I was talking about with Reader, which is I can do everything with keyboard commands. I can navigate the UI. I can grab links to things. I can highlight stuff. It's really, really good to move quickly. And like, I don't do a lot of PDF stuff, but I do get PDFs once in a while. Like maybe I grab a PDF of some gadget that I bought that I want to read some of the manual of, or I just got a digital PDF version of a book I bought recently, and I dropped it into Readwise Reader, and I can read it in there. Or maybe it's something that we got related to an app or something that's coming out. So I do find it useful for that. Also, those court cases, like when I'm writing about the DMA or the DOJ and all these things, those are long PDFs. And Readwise Reader does a very nice job with PDFs, along with, as you said, the newsletters and just regular old web articles. Plus, the synchronization in the background, because it's web-based, is really hard to beat. I mean, that can be an issue with native apps when you send something from the share sheet.
That is an excellent point.
Right?
Yes.
If you send something to Good Links with the share sheet, and this is not the developer's fault, if you don't open that app and then you go on another device and open up Good Links, you're not going to see that article. And that happens to me all the time.
The custom views are also excellent. Like in the homepage, I created one that is tech articles, and it's like everything that is tagged with tech. But I also have another view that is non-tech articles, and that encompasses like gaming, music, entertainment, like all these filters that you can have. Like those are really excellent, and yeah, for people like us, like this sort of thing is really, really good.
Yeah, and I use tags, I would say somewhat sparingly, but they are useful, because I will tag things with projects like the newsletters that we do for Club Mac Stories, or the podcasts that we do. I'll give them those kind of tags. Or if it's just a topic that I know I'm going to be writing a bunch about over the next, however many months, I just come up with a tag for it. And that makes it very easy for me. For instance, if I'm writing about AI, I can go back and find all these articles that I've read in the past about it, because oftentimes it's useful to relink those in the stories that I'm writing in the future. So that, I think, is good. There are a couple of things. These are the reasons that there are friction for me, though, is that one, the iPad app is not very good. And especially on the betas, I find that the right-hand sidebar that Readwise has,
my God, every single time.
It pops into the middle of the article and it drives me bananas. And you can fix it by like going into portrait mode. Then there's ways to get around it, but it's just, there's a UI bug because they're doing some kind of cross-platform development tool that's web-based, I believe, and it's just not working very well in iPad OS 18, at least yet. So there's that, and I do read a lot on my iPad. And then Ghost Reader is a part of the friction too, not because it's necessarily bad. I don't really have much use for it. And I do have this problem now where there aren't a lot of AI tools that I'm using personally. I am checking them out like you do to make sure I'm up to date on all these things. But I always get this suspicion that I'm paying more than I should for some of the products that I use because they have AI built in, and I'm paying for their APIs to OpenAI or whatever they're using. And Readwise Reader is not an inexpensive service. It's what, even on the legacy plan I was on, it's still like $70 or $80 a year or something like that. I think it's even more now. But so I guess there's that. But overall, I think for an all-around reading application, it is really, really good. There's just parts of it that I'm not using probably to their fullest. I will mention one other kind of paper cut with Readwise, which is, and you touched on this, it's hard to get stuff out of it because it's not native. You don't have shortcuts. You don't have the share. You have a share sheet, but there's very limited things that you can do. For instance, on the web, the Mac version on the desktop, it's not built into the share sheet there. It is on iOS, fortunately, but besides getting out a URL, there's very little you can get out of Readwise without first, kind of dealing with their system of copying things, highlighting them, and just using the basics of copy paste, or using a plugin like the Obsidian one to get those highlights into Obsidian that way. Although, while I've got that set up, I don't really use it a ton.
Yeah. Can I read you my prompt?
I would like to hear your prompt, yeah.
Okay, get ready. I just read document title by document author. These are variables supported by the syntax. And I want you to create a markdown blog post where the highlights from the document are formatted as valid markdown block quotes. Here are my highlights, and then there's the code for the list of highlights. Then I say, first, use the document title as a markdown H1 header at the beginning of the text file. Capitalize it using the Chicago Manual of Style Capitalization Guidelines. Then, on a subsequent line, enter document author, writing for document domain. For document domain, I want you to try your best at making it human readable. Remove things like www, https, and the final extension, such as .com or .net. If you think the domain may be comprised of multiple words, try and split it. For instance, www.theverge.com should become The Verge as 2 words. Make sure to capitalize words in domain names with the Chicago Manual of Style as well. Lastly, on a new line, insert all the highlights from the document as markdown block quotes. Each block quote should be separated from another by 2 empty lines of text. You should insert the block quotes in reverse order from what you see them in the document, starting with the oldest and down to the newest. I don't want you to include this in a cut block with triple backticks at the beginning or the end. Just create plain text. Now, this was a lot of work to explain what I want. In good links, it's like 5 actions.
Right, so, I know.
But at the same time, it is pretty impressive that this thing works. I mean, it works. It creates a pop-up for me that I can copy and paste in Obsidian, and all it's missing is the formatting from the highlights. But I feel like I am really stretching it to say, well, yeah, and I can take advantage of AI. Because like all the other things that by default Ghost Reader can do, I'm reading like in the settings, generate thought-provoking questions, extract key takeaways and to-dos, quiz me, expand passage, encyclopedia lookup. Like, I get it, maybe for an academic, maybe this sort of thing is useful, but I disabled all of these things because like for me, the pleasure is in reading and taking my own notes, which Readwise Reader is excellent at supporting. I find most of these AI integrations just kind of like fodder, basically to say, yeah, and we have AI in your documents. Just like every email client these days is doing AI, but it's not really that useful. It kind of feels like that.
Yeah. As long as it doesn't become a distraction from the core product, I'm okay with that.
But... Oh, and you can totally ignore it. You can even disable it in settings, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I want to mention just quickly something else, something that only Europeans can take advantage of, and that is to stay organized, to stay productive. I use a clipboard manager on my phone because I'm in Europe, and soon I will be able to use that on the iPad as well, thanks to the DMA. That is Clip, the clipboard manager by the folks that manage AltStore, the third-party marketplace available in Europe thanks to the digital market stack. It's excellent. It's an iPhone app that allows me to copy things to the clipboard, and whenever I copy something, there's a notification pops up that allows me to save that thing for later. And that means it's very easy and seamless to be able to copy multiple things, save the ones you need for later access in the clipboard, and then when I want to, I can reopen Clip and copy those things again. Now, Clip, like something that I find confusing is that there used to be a a custom keyboard for Clip to sort of repaste those things in a text field from the Clip keyboard.
Yeah.
I cannot find the Clip keyboard anymore.
Huh.
So I'm not sure what happened there. Maybe I need to install a Clip beta that I don't have. Maybe, I'm not sure. I have the vanilla version of Clip from AltStore, and it doesn't have a third-party keyboard anymore. Maybe it'll come back at some point. I'm not sure. But to stay organized, like that, the lack of a clipboard manager has always been like one of the worst points of friction in the iOS experience.
It really
and
is.
I really hope that you, John, get to eventually experience something like this, because it kind of makes your iPhone feel a little bit more like a Mac.
Yeah, no, I hope I get to use something like that in the future too, because I'll tell you, Federico, that's one of the things that I use Raycast for all the time. And I should probably just talk about Raycast in general right here, because that is one of the apps on the Mac that I use throughout the day, because it's an app launcher at its core, but it has an entire store of plugins that developers have created that tie into a lot of the most popular apps that are used on the Mac, as well as web services and other things. And I use it to launch apps. I use it to launch shortcuts a lot because it's very reliable with that. I also, though, use it an awful lot for the clipboard, because you can do a lot of the kind of things that you do with other clipboard managers. Like you can pin certain clips to the app so that when you do the hotkey and it comes up, you can grab something that you use all the time very easily. But it also stores, depending on how you set it up, a very long list of all the stuff you've copied recently. And that's just something that I use all the time, because I'm constantly moving between, copying URLs and images and text for articles, whatever it happens to be. And it's very easy for me to go through and grab those things, the last several of those that I've copied, and you can search for those items. So I know, one of the things I end up doing every single week, at least once, is copying the URL for like the latest episode of App Stories. And so if I need that later in the week, I know I can just start typing the episode number or typing App Stories, and it'll pop up very quickly. I hit return, and now it's on my clipboard, and I can paste it wherever I need it. So that app, and I guess the other thing that's unique about Raycast that I appreciate is that, like a lot of app launchers, is that it's always available at the surface, no matter what app you are working in, meaning that, you hit that hotkey and it just pops over everything. And if you're someone who uses Stage Manager, as I still am, because I like to torture myself, that is useful, because I tried out for a little while a third-party clipboard manager, and it had to switch to that app every time. So I was constantly getting that flipping between the app I was working in and the clipboard manager. But with Raycast, that doesn't happen, because it's all, at the very top level, and I can grab something without switching the app that I'm in. So I appreciate that too.
Yeah. Can you tell me more about Airtable?
Yeah, so this is a very recent one for me, and this is something I've struggled with for a really long time, is ways to organize lots of different kinds of information coming from lots of different sources. And I have used spreadsheets in the past, like numbers. I've tried to even do this in Obsidian, because you can create databases and tables in Obsidian with the right plugins. But Obsidian's really about text. And while you can do it, it's not as flexible or as useful as it is with a dedicated app. So the reason I moved to Airtable is that for certain projects, especially when it comes to like tracking the podcasts that we do, the sponsors that are going to be on those episodes, and the various, artwork and show descriptions and URLs and links to the episodes on different platforms, all those things. It's a combination of images, URLs, and text and dates, and sometimes numbers, but not always numbers, which is why I stopped using spreadsheets, because spreadsheets are really for doing calculations. And I'm less often doing calculations than I am just organizing lots of data for a defined set of things. In most cases, it's like podcast episodes. And so Airtable does just a really good job of handling all those data types and allowing you to view it in a bunch of different ways, whether it's as a calendar that shows a schedule of all the episodes we have coming up, or as kind of a more traditional grid layout, like a spreadsheet, or something else. And I'm still a pretty early newbie user of Airtable, but I've really enjoyed using it so far because it's helped me pull that stuff together from a lot of different sources and link it together in one place where I don't have to go searching through my email and then through Discord and then on the web somewhere to find all the information. It's always in one place and helps me kind of move a little bit faster.
Nice. Yeah. I have some almost real-time follow-up. The reason I was not finding the Clip keyboard anymore.
Yeah.
You need to use the Clip beta, and I was not seeing the Clip beta despite being a patron for AltStore.
Right.
I had to unlink my Patreon account in AltStore's settings, link it again, and the Clip beta showed up. So probably something got stuck.
Yeah,
and
probably.
Now I have my fancy custom keyboard for my clipboard manager again. Obviously, I feel like I want to mention shortcuts as a way to stay organized, especially because shortcuts allowed me to create widgets for the lock screen and the home screen and control center. I figured I'm going to put these two shortcuts everywhere so that no matter what I'm doing, I even have them in the action button. So literally, in all the places where I can put a shortcut, I will at the very least put these two specific shortcuts. One to instantly create a new quick note in Apple Notes. It goes back to that idea from last week, like the ease of capture of Apple Notes. Being able to quickly from anywhere on my phone save an idea is killer, is an incredible feature. So shortcut number one, create a new quick note. And shortcut number two, show my quick notes. Open the Notes app in the quick notes folder. Just show me all the things that I saved. Sort of as an inbox. And those two shortcuts, they're literally made of one action each, but I put them everywhere. They're on my home screen, lock screen, control center now, and the action button. So no matter what I'm doing, I have a way to get to those functionalities. And that alone sort of really helps me stay organized. But there are more, obviously, esoteric ways that shortcuts helps me stay organized. I have an automation, for example, that runs every weekend, sees the latest issue of Mac Stories Weekly, and creates a new project in reminders for me with some information pre-filled for the next issue. So let's say, for example, that it sees, issue 405 was the latest one. I'm going to create a project for you for issue 406 and give it a due date of next week and pre-add some tasks for you. So the ability to not do that manually anymore has been a huge time saver. I have shortcuts to, for example, to save links from the web under a specific project for articles that I want to link on Mac Stories. It's something that I do on a regular basis. Just these tiny things that shortcuts helps me save time with. There are more complex automations, but they don't have to be complex for them to be useful. And that I think is also something that Apple understands, and why they've been pushing developers to adopt even these like single actions that, however, are highly configurable, so that even if you don't create a shortcut that's made of 20, 30, 200 actions, even just one can be really useful.
Yeah, I think that's true too. And one of the things, I mean, to give people an idea of what I've been doing with shortcuts to kind of keep myself more efficient, is I've created a bunch of utility shortcuts which get used by other shortcuts. I broke out certain things. Like I found that for a lot of tasks or documents, I was grabbing the latest issue number of the club newsletter, or the latest episode number of App Stories. And so I have little utility functions that just go and grab those URLs, strip out the issue or episode number, and then return that. And then it gets automatically dumped into something else, whether that's a template like you're talking about for the newsletter, or if it's a template, I have template tasks and projects for each episode of the podcast that we produce that have all the different pieces and things that I have to do. And it's just handy to see the episode number in there as I'm creating that, so that it reminds me of it for when I'm typing it somewhere. But it also, if there's any overlap one week to the next from one episode to the other, distinguish between which episode I'm dealing with. So that's a big piece of what I do with shortcuts.
Yeah, I organize other things that are not articles or tasks or shortcuts. I want to mention 2 apps for my entertainment. Sofa. You reviewed this one on Mac Stories, I believe, John. I use it for, you can track a bunch of entertainment types in Sofa. I just use it as my video game tracking utility. I try lots of different video games. Some of them I abandon, some of them I try to finish later. And to make sense of all these games and retro games I want to play, I use Sofa because it lets me tag those articles. It's got this feature called custom ingredients, where basically you define the metadata for each item, and then you can create these custom views for specific types of metadata. To give you an example, so that I don't sound like a crazy person, I have my master like games list, but then I have like this very specific views from that list. Like, for example, I have one called Played in 2024 from 2024. So these are games that came out this year and that I also played this year. And all of this like came out means there's the metadata for the release date. Played means I checked off a toggle under a games page that says, I consider this game played, as long as I'm concerned. I have another called Dropped Games. These are games that I tried and that I decided I no longer want to play these games. I have one called Retro Console Backlog. So these are games that automatically populate this list if they are older than 15 years and they are in my backlog. Like all these things you can do with Sofa. And I mean, I do it with video games. You can do it with just about anything. You can save links in Sofa. You can save audiobooks. You can save podcast episodes. You can save music. Like, I'm sure if you want to, you can probably build a pretty killer read later app with Sofa and custom ingredients. I should actually maybe check it out at some point.
Yeah, you know what I've done with it? I've actually saved places I want to visit, whether it's,
there you go.
Right, trips or restaurants. There's all kinds of stuff you can do like that.
Yeah. And lastly, I want to mention the combo of Play by Marcos Tanaka and Unwatched. So Unwatched is a relatively new entry in the third-party YouTube utility space. Play is the original one. So Play is an app that integrates with YouTube, and it's basically read later, but for YouTube videos. Unwatched takes a slightly different approach in that it kind of looks like Castro, the podcast client, and it's largely based around the same triaging idea. You have your inbox and you have your queue, and you move between those two. They're like two separate tabs, and you choose, if you see something that is interesting from your inbox, you add it to your queue, and if you want to clear your inbox, you can. Unwatched as some really good integrations with YouTube, like for example, It lets you choose the all kinds of HD quality versions from the built-in YouTube player. It also has support for chapters. Like, it basically treats YouTube videos like podcast episodes. Like, it lets you skip between chapters of a video, pretty much like Castro lets you skip between chapters of a podcast episode. And so increasingly, I've been gravitating toward these two apps. And I also mentioned Play because Marcos, the developer, is working on some pretty solid updates for iOS 18, maybe as a response to the enthusiasm around Unwatched. I mean, competition is great because of this, because you have indie developers sort of trying to one-up each other, and it's great for users, right? Because we got all these options. So I am loving this sort of these two flavors of YouTube read later utilities. I'm deciding between these two, but increasingly, instead of using the YouTube app, which, with the algorithmic homepage, it makes me waste a lot of time, I just subscribe to my favorite channels, I get them in my inbox, and then I choose what I want to watch later.
Yeah, no, those are both great apps. I find Unwatched very intriguing. I was having some iCloud sync issues.
Did you see the latest test flight with the fixes?
Oh, no, I have not seen that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know, because I do watch YouTube on a bunch of different devices, so not having the sync was kind of becoming an impediment. But Play has a similar inbox sort of concept where you have your channels inbox and you can see all of the new videos from all the channels that you subscribe to, and then you can just add the ones to the app that you want to watch. And then I typically do watch them in the YouTube app, but you can watch them in Play as well. Okay, Federico, to round things out, I want to talk about Dropover. This is a Mac utility that allows you to put files into a temporary parking place. There are a lot of apps that do this. What I like about Dropover is that I've found new ways to kind of keep my downloads folder from growing as quickly as it did in the past, because, I download a lot of things during the course of a week. And what I use with Dropover for to solve that issue is that I monitor the downloads folder with Dropover, so that as soon as I download something, it immediately pops into one of these little Dropover shelves. And what's nice about that is now I have it handy right there. If it's, something I need to drag into an email to send to somebody, super easy. Or I could just get to, see what's in there and immediately jump to the Finder and do whatever I'm going to do with it there. But once I'm finished, the nice thing about it is that one of the options is to move everything on that Dropover shelf into the trash. So if it's something that's very temporary, like an image that I need for a story, and I've already uploaded it to our CDN, or I don't know what else it might be, a little bit of text here or there, a file that I'm sharing with somebody else and I've already shared it, I just go in and I delete it, and it keeps my downloads folder from growing quite as big as it has in the past. So I highly recommend exploring it. It has a bunch of other features. For instance, you can also drag things into a Dropover shelf and have some dedicated defined actions that can happen, including sending them to a shortcut. So there are a lot of automation tools available that you can use with it too. But one of my favorite things is this way that I've been able to use it to monitor a particular folder. And it's not limited to the downloads folder. It works with any folder. So you could do something similar with a different folder. All right, Federico, that's it for this episode of App Stories. I think we've given people a lot of interesting apps to play with. I
think so.
I think so. I want to thank our sponsor again. That was Memberful. You can find the two of us at macstories.net. Federico and I are on Mastodon. Just go to vitici.macstories.net and johnvorhees.macstories.net to follow us there. And we're on Threads and Instagram. Federico is at Vitici. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.